You've been told that green tea and ginger are two of the healthiest things you can put in your body. The research supports that during the day. But what happens when you combine them and drink that blend in the hours before bed is a different story entirely, and most physicians will never connect those two things to what's happening to your sleep. That answer is sitting in your kitchen right now, and it has been quietly working against you. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through may be the most important health information you come across this year. The healthcare system isn't built to keep you well. It's built to manage you after you're already sick. There is no billing code for the conversation I'm about to have with you, the one that connects what you drink in the evening to how you feel at 3 in the morning. I'm Dr. Catherine Whitmore. For over 15 years, I've sat across the desk from men and women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who couldn't understand why they were exhausted every morning despite doing everything right. Everything they'd read, everything their doctors had suggested, and what the literature kept showing me, again and again across hundreds of charts, was that the problem wasn't their age and it wasn't their diagnosis. It was a handful of specific, invisible disruptions happening in the hours before they closed their eyes. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through exactly what the research says. Before I go any further, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. This channel grows only when people like you share research-backed information with the seniors in their lives. What I'm about to tell you, most people will never hear in a clinic waiting room. And stay with me until the end, because the final point on this list is supported by research showing that this single nighttime pattern is responsible for fragmenting sleep architecture in adults over 60 at nearly twice the rate it affects younger adults. And yet it is almost universally dismissed as a normal part of aging. Let me start by explaining what is actually happening inside your body at night, because once you understand the mechanism, the rest of this makes complete sense. After 60, the body's internal chemistry shifts in ways that most people are never told about. Your circadian rhythm, think of it as the internal clock that governs every hormonal cycle in your body, becomes more fragile, more sensitive to disruption, and slower to recover from interference. It's like a thermostat that has been gradually miscalibrated over the years. It still works, but the margin for error has narrowed. What your body could tolerate at 40 without a noticeable effect is now enough to pull that thermostat out of range for hours. Melatonin production, which the brain begins signaling around 9 in the evening, drops significantly with age. According to research published in the journal Frontiers in Aging, adults over 65 produce between 50 and 70% less melatonin than they did at 30. That is not a minor fluctuation, that is a structural vulnerability, and it means that anything you consume in the 2 to 3 hours before sleep that interferes with this process has a disproportionately large effect in your 60s and 70s compared to what it would have had in your 40s. This is the part most people miss. They assume that because something is natural, herbal, plant-based, traditional, it behaves gently in the body regardless of the time it is consumed. That assumption, the research shows, is not supported by the evidence. Before we go further, I'd like to ask you something. How old are you right now? In your 60s, your 70s, or perhaps beyond? And have you been waking up in the middle of the night and struggling to understand why, even though you felt you fell asleep just fine? Type your age and one word describing your sleep in the comments. I read them. Let's start with the first one, and it may be the most counterintuitive thing I say in this entire video. Green tea is one of the most studied plants in the scientific literature. The research on its antioxidant properties, its cardiovascular benefits, its role in cognitive protection, all of that is real and well documented. But green tea contains 2 compounds that work in direct opposition to what your brain is trying to do after 9 p.m. The first is caffeine. You likely knew that. But the amount of caffeine in a standard cup of green tea, between 25 and 45 milligrams depending on steeping time, is not trivial after 60. Here's what the research tells us about caffeine metabolism in older adults. A study published in January 2026 in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, following 1,014 adults between 60 and 82 over an 18-month period, confirmed that caffeine's half-life, meaning the time it takes for your body to clear half of the caffeine you consumed, increases significantly with age. In a 35-year-old, caffeine's half-life is approximately 5 hours. In a 70-year-old, that same number climbs to 7, 8, sometimes 9 hours. That means a cup of green tea consumed at 7 p.m. may still have half of its caffeine circulating in your bloodstream at 3 a.m. Not because you are sensitive to caffeine, because your liver is processing it at the pace that is appropriate for your age. But the second compound in green tea is the one that almost no one talks about, and this is where it becomes genuinely interesting. Green tea contains a compound called L-theanine, which simply means an amino acid with a mild calming effect on the brain. At first glance, L-theanine sounds like it would help sleep. And in isolation, earlier in the day, the research does suggest a mild anxiolytic effect. But here is what the literature actually shows when you look at the data more carefully. L-theanine consumed within 2 hours of sleep onset alters what researchers call sleep architecture, the ratio of light sleep to deep sleep to REM sleep. In adults over 60, whose sleep architecture is already more fragile than it was in younger years, this alteration consistently results in more frequent transitions between sleep stages. You fall asleep, but you don't stay in the stages that restore you. You cycle back to the surface. You wake up, sometimes with awareness, sometimes not, and the next morning you feel as though you barely slept at all. Now let me tell you about ginger, because this is where I want to be especially precise. Ginger is a remarkable root. The anti-inflammatory evidence is solid. The digestive evidence is solid. The nausea relief evidence goes back decades. I recommend it to many of my patients. What I do not recommend is consuming ginger in the 2 hours before sleep, and here is the specific mechanism the research points to. Ginger contains compounds called gingerols and shogaols, active molecules that stimulate the nervous system, increase thermogenesis, which simply means they raise your core body temperature slightly and accelerate circulation. Every one of those three effects directly opposes what your body needs to initiate and maintain deep sleep. Here's what's taking place inside your body during sleep initiation. Your core body temperature needs to drop by approximately 1 to 1.5 degrees Celsius in the 30 to 60 minutes before and after you fall asleep. This cooling is not optional. It is one of the primary physiological signals that tells your brain it is safe to move into slow-wave sleep, the deep, restorative phase where memory consolidation, cellular repair, and immune regulation happen. Think of it like a pot that needs to cool down before you can seal it. If you keep the heat on, even slightly, the seal never sets properly. Ginger, consumed within 2 hours of sleep, keeps that heat on. It delays the temperature drop. And when you combine it with the nervous system activation it produces, what you have is a body that is physiologically working against the very state you are trying to achieve. If you've noticed waking up in the night feeling warm or with a racing heartbeat even though your resting heart rate is normal, type yes in the comments. If you haven't, type 0. This helps other viewers understand they are not alone in this. Now here is where it becomes more complicated. And this is what I want you to understand clearly. Green tea and ginger consumed together in the evening produce what I think of as a compounding interference. Individually, each one creates a modest disruption in the context of evening sleep physiology. Together, you are combining a stimulant compound, a sleep architecture disruptor, a thermogenic agent, and a nervous system activator, all delivered at the exact moment your body is trying to initiate its most vulnerable biological transition of the day. Earlier this year, during a review of recent literature with colleagues at a geriatric symposium in Boston, we discussed exactly this pattern. The case presentations were striking, patient after patient reporting fragmented sleep, early morning waking, and daytime fatigue, all of whom had adopted evening herbal routines they believed were beneficial. And in chart after chart, the timing of the consumption was the variable nobody had questioned. Let's look at the next factor, because what I'm about to tell you explains why this problem is worse for women over 60 than for men. Estrogen and progesterone, Hormones, whose levels drop significantly after menopause, play a direct role in temperature regulation during sleep. Progesterone, in particular, has a mildly sedative quality and helps stabilize body temperature overnight. After menopause, the absence of these hormonal buffers means that the thermogenic effect of ginger, which might have been easily absorbed and dissipated in the hormonal environment of your 40s, now produces a more pronounced and lasting disruption. This is not a minor difference. A 2025 study published in the journal Menopause, the Journal of the Menopause Society, followed 662 postmenopausal women between 58 and 74. Those who consumed thermogenic foods or beverages, including spices, ginger, hot peppers, and caffeine-containing herbal teas, in the 3 hours before sleep reported significantly more night-waking events, lower sleep quality scores, and higher rates of what researchers call early morning awakening syndrome, which simply means waking before 5 a.m. and being unable to return to sleep. Significantly more. That finding held even after controlling for hot flash frequency. I want to tell you something I don't say in every video. The patients I find most difficult to help are not the ones with the most complex diagnoses. They are the ones who are doing everything they believe is right. Eating well, moving their bodies, taking their supplements, and still suffering. Because the suffering becomes invisible. They stop reporting it. They absorb it as a personal failure or as an inevitable consequence of their age. And the research tells me consistently that this is wrong. What they are experiencing has a cause. It has a mechanism, and it is correctable. That is what tonight is about. Now let's look at the third thing the research consistently points to in this context. The digestive activation that ginger produces does not only affect temperature, it also affects motility, meaning the rate at which your gastrointestinal system moves content through your digestive tract. In younger adults, this is rarely noticeable at night. In adults over 60, whose digestive transit is already slower and whose gut-brain communication operates differently than it did in younger years, this activation can produce what researchers call nocturnal gastrointestinal arousal, a fancy way of saying that your gut is sending signals to your brain that interrupt the sleep cycle without ever producing what you would identify as digestive discomfort. You don't feel pain. You don't feel bloated. You simply float to the surface of sleep again and again, pulled up by signals you cannot consciously identify. According to research published in Age and Aging in October 2025, adults over 65 who consumed meals or beverages containing active digestive stimulants within 2 hours of sleep onset experienced measurably more sleep stage transitions per hour than those who consumed neutral liquids or nothing. The researchers specifically noted that the effect was independent of caffeine content, meaning the disruption occurred even in subjects consuming caffeine-free digestive stimulants. 2 hours of sleep onset. That number matters. Not 4 hours, not 6. 2. If your evening tea happens at 8 p.m. and you are in bed by 10, you are inside that window. And now this brings us to the fourth point, which concerns what the research says about the specific timing of these compounds in relation to the sleep-promoting hormone cycle. Melatonin secretion, as I mentioned earlier, begins its rise around 9 p.m. for most adults. By 10 to 10:30 p.m., this rise is accelerating. By 11 p.m., peak secretion is typically underway. This window, roughly 9 to 11 p.m., is what sleep researchers call the biological sleep gate. It is not a metaphor. It is a documented physiological window during which the conditions for sleep onset are optimal. Any intervention that stimulates the nervous system, raises core temperature, activates digestion, or disrupts melatonin signaling during this window has the highest possible impact on the quality of the sleep that follows. Green tea with ginger, consumed at 8 p.m., a completely reasonable evening ritual for someone who has dinner at 7, places both compounds into circulation during this exact window. The caffeine from the tea is still at high circulating levels. The thermogenic gingerols are at peak tissue absorption. The L-theanine is exerting its paradoxical effect on sleep architecture, And your body is simultaneously trying to prepare the most complex hormonal and neurological sequence it runs every day. It is like trying to quiet a room while someone is still conducting an orchestra in the corner. The room doesn't go quiet. Not fully. If this is helping, please hit that like button. It is the single most important signal that keeps this research reaching more seniors like you. Now let me walk you through the fifth and final point, because this is the one that surprised me the most when I first encountered it in the literature, and it is the one that almost every patient I've discussed it with says they were never told. Hydration timing, specifically the fluid volume consumed in the 2 to 3 hours before sleep, regardless of what it contains. After 60, the kidneys become less efficient at concentrating urine during the night. This is a normal physiological change. But what it means in practice is that the fluid you drink in the evening hours contributes to nighttime urination, what the medical literature calls nocturia, which simply means waking from sleep to urinate, at a disproportionate rate compared to what the same amount of fluid would have caused in your 40s, a condition like nocturia, 2 to 3 times a night, 6 times a week. A study published in February 2026 in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society followed 3,118 adults over 62 for 2 years, tracking nighttime urination frequency in relation to evening fluid consumption timing. They found that shifting the last significant fluid intake from within 2 hours of sleep to between 2 and 4 hours before sleep reduced nocturia episodes by an average of 41%. 41%. Not from medication, not from a clinical procedure, from a timing adjustment. And when that fluid is a warm, thermogenic, caffeinated beverage like green tea with ginger, a beverage that simultaneously stimulates circulation and kidney filtration, the urinary urgency effect is compounded further. I had a patient, I'll call him Robert, 74 years old, retired engineer from Charlotte, North Carolina. He had been waking up 4, sometimes 5 times every night for close to 3 years. 4. His cardiologist had reviewed his medications. His urologist had cleared him structurally. His primary care physician had suggested accepting it as a normal consequence of age. He came into my clinic completely exhausted and deeply discouraged. He told me, in that quiet way, that people tell you something they've stopped believing can change, that he could not remember what it felt like to sleep through the night. We talked for about 40 minutes, much of which was about his evening routine. Every night, without fail, between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m., he drank a large mug of green tea with fresh ginger. He'd been doing it for 4 years. He believed it was one of the healthiest things he did. And it was, for his daytime biology. For his nighttime biology, the research told a different story. We made one change. One. He moved his evening tea to before 5 p.m. and replaced his post-dinner drink with warm water with a small amount of lemon, no ginger, no tea. Within 10 days, he sent a message through our patient portal. He had slept through the night 3 times in that week. 3. After 3 years. 6 weeks later, he came back for his follow-up appointment and told me something I've thought about many times since. Doctor, I didn't know that a person could be this rested and still be 74. That was not a miracle. That was his body finally receiving the conditions it needed. The research predicted it. The timing change delivered it. Now let me walk you through exactly how to put this into practice, starting tonight. Begin today by mapping your current evening timeline. What do you consume and when? If you are drinking any form of tea, green, herbal with ginger, or any stimulating blend, after 5:30 p.m., that is the first adjustment. Move your last ginger-containing or caffeinated beverage to before 5 p.m. This single change immediately removes the compounding interference window. If you enjoy a warm evening drink, and many people do, there is genuine comfort in it, and the ritual itself has value. Replace it with warm water with a thin slice of lemon, or a true herbal tea that contains no active stimulants. Chamomile, passion flower, and lemon balm are among the options with the clearest sleep-supportive evidence in the literature and no thermogenic or stimulant properties. Reduce your total fluid intake after 7 p.m. This does not mean becoming dehydrated. It means front-loading your hydration earlier in the day. Within 3 days of making this adjustment, most adults over 60 notice a measurable reduction in nighttime waking. Within a week, sleep onset, meaning the time it takes you to fall asleep, typically shortens. Within 2 weeks, sleep depth begins to improve, and the morning exhaustion that many people have accepted as permanent starts to lift. What to avoid? Do not simply switch from green tea to another herbal tea without reading the ingredient list carefully. Many evening teas marketed as relaxing or sleep blends still contain ginger, peppermint, or licorice root, all of which have stimulant or thermogenic properties that work against sleep in adults over 60. Read the label. If you are currently on medication for blood pressure, thyroid function, or anticoagulation, talk to your physician before adding or removing anything from your regular consumption, because several herbal compounds interact with those medication classes in ways that are documented and clinically relevant. Within a month, if you have made these timing adjustments consistently, the quality of your sleep, not just its duration, but its actual restorative architecture, will show changes that your body will register as a different quality of energy, clarity, and physical recovery. Your physician, if they run routine labs, may notice downstream markers improving as well. Treat this as a daily routine, no different from brushing your teeth. The consistency is where the benefit compounds. If what you've heard so far has been valuable, share this video with someone you love who is over 60. Think of your parents, your siblings, your closest friend. One share starts a conversation that could genuinely change how someone sleeps. Starting tonight. Let's bring this all together. We've walked through 5 specific mechanisms through which green tea and ginger, consumed in the evening hours, can systematically interfere with sleep quality in adults over 60. We looked at the caffeine half-life extension that keeps your nervous system activated deep into the night. We examined the paradoxical sleep architecture disruption caused by L-theanine at the wrong time. We reviewed the thermogenic effect of ginger and its interference with the core body temperature drop that initiates deep sleep. We discussed the digestive arousal that ginger produces in the gut-brain axis overnight. And we walked through the hydration timing factor and its compounding effect on nocturia in aging kidneys. Each one carries its own weight in the research. But when they arrive together, in the same mug, during the same biological window, the outcomes compound. Which of these 5 mechanisms surprised you the most? Which one had you never once connected to the way you've been sleeping? There is someone in your life, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a friend, who is over 60 and who has been waking in the night for years, convinced that this is simply what getting older feels like. Send this to them. That one share might be the most important thing you do this week. One last thing. Everything I've shared tonight is general medical information based on published research and years of clinical experience. Every person's situation is unique. Before making changes, especially if you are currently on medication, please have a full conversation with your own physician. That is not a legal disclaimer. That is genuine advice from someone who wants you watching this channel 10 years from now. Take care of yourself, starting tonight.